Welcome to a bonus edition of Behind the Mic with AudioFile magazine. I'm Jo Reed.
The pandemic had been hard for Olive Kitteridge. Hard for everyone, really. But Olive had endured it, day after day in her little apartment in this retirement community. Yet when they stopped allowing people to eat in the dining room and started bringing their food to them instead, she thought she would go absolutely batty.
That was Kimberly Farr narrating Tell Me Everything by Elizabeth Strout. Kimberly has had a long and distinguished career as an actor on stage and screen and as a celebrated audiobook narrator, a gifted performer with an impressive range. Kimberly has brought characters and stories to life in fiction and nonfiction alike. Whether it's Elizabeth Strout's Olive Kitteridge novels, Joan Didion's essays, the memoirs of Julia Child, or the poetry of Mary Oliver, Kimberly captures their voices with a rare clarity, nuance, and a deep understanding of language. And now, to no one's surprise, Kimberly has been named a Golden Voice by AudioFile magazine, an award that recognizes excellence and lasting achievement in audiobook narration. Kimberly and I spoke recently about her path to audiobook work and what it means to inhabit every voice on the page. Our conversation begins with Kimberly Farr remembering what it was like growing up in Los Angeles.
I loved being a kid in LA. It was a great town. It was small, believe it or not, comparatively small. And it was a company town. And it seemed as if everybody here was somehow involved with the biz, show business. And my mother put me in dance classes when I was 5 with a man who won an Academy Award for his choreography. His name was Seymour Felix, and he worked with Busby Berkeley. And he was in the latter part of his life, and he decided to open this dance studio. And that was my first experience with performing.
Well, you're in LA, so obviously you know you can make a career out of this. When did you make the decision that that was what you were going to do?
I think I was about 9. I was the kid in the neighborhood who got all the neighborhood kids together and made them perform. I was the person who had all of the dreams of glory, I guess. I don't know. I loved being taught to dance. I loved being in the recitals. I loved television. Didn't see many movies because I was little, but I loved television and I loved the idea of being on stage. And I also was a really voracious reader. When I was little, my mother took me to the library once every 2 weeks. That was the time that you could take the book out for, 2 weeks. And there was a 10-book limit. So I would grab 10 books, and 2 weeks later, I'd be back and I'd get 10 more. So I think I've often said this, if I hadn't become an actor, I would have been a librarian. I really would have. I love books. Love them.
I love libraries.
I love libraries, too. I really do love libraries. I love the way they smell.
I do, too.
Isn't that weird?
Friday was library day at our house.
Oh, really? Every Friday, huh?
Every other Friday. Oh, it was big. And my mother, too. My mother loved reading. I'd go to the children's section. She'd be in the adult section.
Well, my mother was not a big reader. And so I have to really give her credit for recognizing that I loved books and she supported that. She made sure I got to the library.
Well, how did you move into audiobooks? So on one hand, obviously, it seems like a natural fit, given your love of books and love of performing.
Yeah, that's what it was. Most of my acting career took place in New York. I left Los Angeles when I was young, and I stayed in New York for 16 years. And then my husband and I made the decision to come out here, and we started our family. And I was having so much fun being the mom that I just thought, I don't really want to be spending my energy there right now. My life is going in another direction. And I was very lucky that my husband was making enough money to support us. So I was the mom for 5, 6, 7, 8 years. And then I started thinking, I don't want to end my career yet, and what can I do about that? And at the time, it was in the early 2000s, John, my husband, had started listening to audiobooks in the car because he had to drive an awful lot. So I got in the car one day, and the tape, this is years ago, the tape was still in the tape deck, and it came on when I turned on the car. He had not turned it off. And I started listening to this book, and I almost crashed the car listening to the story. And I thought, I could do that. I bet I could do that. And I had a pal at the time who was an audio engineer, and he volunteered to make me a demo. And I went into the studio and I recorded 5 or 6 excerpts from different kinds of books. And I sent it to Books on Tape, which at the time was the West Coast place to do audiobooks. And they were in Santa Ana at the time, which is, a couple hours drive from here, hour and a half maybe. And I waited to hear from them. And I heard nothing for 6 months. And I thought, well, either they really aren't interested, or they lost it, or they didn't get it. And I was just about to email them and say, hey, did you get my demo? When Dan Musselman from Books on Tape called, which by that time had been bought by Random House. And they were here in Woodland Hills in the valley, in the San Fernando Valley where I live. And he called me in for an audition, and I went in and they hired me.
What surprised you about audiobook narration? Were you surprised by how rigorous it is, for example?
Well, my background is in the theater, and the theater is rigorous. Well, so are movies and television in their own way.
But the rigor for each is different.
It is. On film, it's about maintaining your concentration and being able to work out of order, which is difficult. And the theater, it requires an enormous amount of physical stamina and the ability to come up with it 8 times a week, which is hard. Audio is, as you say, it's got its own parameters, its own requirements. You have to be, this sounds so stupid, but you have to be able to sit still. You have to be able to act without moving, except your mouth, of course. Some people have a lot of trouble doing that. You also have to be able to sit for hours and read for hours. And some work, particularly I think for women who have to do men's voices, it's hard on your voice. I wouldn't say I was surprised by any of it, because I was lucky in that I had a lot of experience doing many different things. I don't know what I was expecting, if anything. What I got was a job that I absolutely adored. Every minute of it. It was so much fun. It was fun to read the material, a lot of which I would not have read otherwise. And so it's, expanded my horizons enormously to be doing this job. And here's my guilty secret. I love playing all the parts.
Like Bottom in A Midsummer Night's Dream. You want to be Bottom.
I want to be Bottom. That's right. I want to play all the parts.
That's right. You only have your voice, but boy, do you have a range of characters.
And that's really fun. And the other part that's fun about that is that you don't get typed as anything because nobody can see you.
With audiobooks, you're recording in a booth. Maybe you're working with a director or a producer, but you're often doing it on your own without the feedback, without the collaborative nature of theater or a film. So that passing back and forth of energy, you sort of have to summon it up on your own.
Well, here's the story. I don't work without a director.
I'm nodding. You can't see that, but I am.
Yeah. I do not have a home studio. And you have hit the nail on the head. The reason I don't have a home studio is because the thing about acting that was always most attractive to me was the collaboration, was the bouncing ideas off of other people, was the coming together in the pursuit of the same end. And I know that the audiobook business is now very different than it was when I started. And one of the big differences is that Most people have a home studio and they are capable of working on their own, and I laud them and am in awe of that ability because I don't have it. But I have resisted installing a studio in my home primarily for that reason, because it's not fun. It's not fun to be alone in a room for me.
Well, how do you prepare for narrating fiction, for example? And why don't we start with Elizabeth Strout? You've narrated most of her books, including all of the books in the series that takes place in this little town in Maine that began with the Pulitzer Prize winner, Olive Kitteridge.
Elizabeth Strout. What a brilliant, brilliant writer she is. Fiction it's fun. It's a lot of fun. My process is similar for fiction and nonfiction. First of all, you have to read the material. Obviously, you have to read it all. For fiction, I start with the text in a notebook, and I start writing down what page, what character first appears on. I write down all of the stuff that other characters say about that character, and I write down stuff that I observe about the character itself, him or herself. If there's a dialect involved or an accent, I have to research that if I can't already do it. That is really fun. I love doing accents. Interestingly enough, for Elizabeth's books, for the ones that most of them take place in Maine, Elizabeth did not want a Down East accent. She specifically told Kelly Gilday, the director and producer of those books, that she did not want a Down East accent, which I found really interesting.
Yeah, and kind of makes sense because I could see how that might be distracting.
I think I've never met Elizabeth. I've never spoken to her, so I don't wish to speak for her in any way. But what I was thinking was that perhaps the stories are more universal if they're not rooted in a specific place, vocally, audibly in a specific place.
Olive's private view is that life depends on what she thinks of as big bursts and little bursts. Big bursts are things like marriage or children, intimacies that keep you afloat. But these big bursts hold dangerous, unseen currents, which is why you need the little bursts as well. A friendly clerk at Bradley's, let's say, or the waitress at Dunkin' Donuts who knows how you like your coffee. Tricky business, really.
Elizabeth Strout explores the world of Crosby, Maine through multiple books and different characters. They're taking a center stage perhaps in one chapter and then receding to a supporting player and then will appear as a major character in another book.
Don't you just love that about her stuff?
I do.
The guy that wanders into a scene in one book, in the next book, he's the main character. I mean, it's just great.
How do you arrive at voicing their characterizations? I mean, or the process for determining the voice for any given character, but especially with Elizabeth's books, because you're picking up somebody who exactly wandered into a scene 3 books ago, and suddenly here he is. It's his point of view that's driving this story.
You know, years ago, I listened to Emily Rankin read a book about the Alcott family, Louisa May and her sibs.
Mm-hmm.
And here's a group of people who share geography and family and age. And how do you make those 4 voices sound different so that when one of them is speaking, you know exactly who it is? And Emily did such a brilliant job of that. And at the time, I was thinking, how is she doing that? And then I realized that every character, if you allow that character to penetrate your instrument, that's a really awkward way of saying it, but my job is to be the conduit for the author's voice. And each character, if you listen, has a voice of her or his own. So when I'm preparing fiction, I do my darndest to climb into that person's head I can't think of a better way of putting it. There are certain technical things you can do to make a character stand out. You can play with pitch, the pitch of the voice. Is it high? Is it low? Is it medium? Is it loud? Does the person talk like this? Is the person scared? Those things are relatively easy to adjust. But to understand and replicate what the character is thinking and where they're coming from, what makes them say this thing in this particular moment, that I think you just have to get out of its way. You just have to let it happen. One of my weaknesses as an actor was that I was so intent on being perfect that I let that get in the way of being good. And I planned and rehearsed every moment in the theater, which is possible. But then you sit down with a text that's 300 or 400 or 500 pages long, and there's no way to rehearse that. No way. And so you have to trust yourself, and you have to trust the material, and you just have to say, okay, this is going to be okay. It's going to be good. It's going to be great. I think that's the most valuable thing that audiobooks taught me as a performer.
With Olive, when we meet her in Olive Kitteridge, how old is she? Mid-30s? Her son is still young.
Yeah, he's still pretty young.
Let's say at most she's 38,
yeah.
I would say.
Yeah.
And then the most recent book is Tell Me Everything. And she's 92 or 93.
She's old, yes.
She's old. And you need to convey that. But at the same time, we need to know it's still Olive.
That's a kind of a technical adjustment that you make. You make her voice a little slower, maybe a little deeper. But I'm telling you, Joe, that the writing is so brilliant that you just let it carry you. In Tell Me Everything, one of the most fun things about it is that Olive is talking to Lucy Barton, who is another Elizabeth Strout heroine. And the two of them have conversations in this book.
They trade stories.
Yes. I have a story for you.
Come in, yelled Olive. And Lucy came in, wearing a striped blue and white dress, the material reminding Olive of a seersucker suit Henry used to have years ago, and Lucy looked nice in the dress. It went almost to her ankles with a slight tuck at the waist, and she wore her green sneakers, which was too bad because they didn't go with the blue. I like that, Olive said, putting her hand down in front of herself to indicate Lucy's dress. You do? Really? We went to Rockland last week and I bought this. I spent a lot of money on it, Lucy said as she sat down on the small couch. I bet you did, Olive said. And now I'm thinking it wasn't worth it. Olive said, It looks fine. I told you I liked it. Now let's hear your story.
I am fortunate in that, for some reason, I feel Elizabeth Strout's cadence in my soul. I just get it. What can I say? It was a gift. It was a gift to be asked to read those books.
Olive herself is such a complicated character. She's cantankerous. She's brutally honest. I was listening to the book in my car, and I'm literally saying out loud, Olive, please don't say a word. Don't do this. Don't do this. I was just so frustrated with her. But she's also so empathetic, and I care about her. At the end of Tell Me Everything, she's 92, and there's the party scene in the book. And I was very concerned that more people were not talking to Olive. Why are not they? Why is she being ignored in that corner? I worried about her so much. And, that's the life of those books, I think.
I feel like they're real people at this point. I mean, don't take me to the crazy place, but they feel in my heart as though they're people I know. Real people that I know.
You narrate a lot of nonfiction as well as fiction, but you prepare pretty much the same way for both?
Up until fairly recently, there was only one voice in nonfiction, and that was the author's voice. And lately they've started to ask us narrators to give the people who are speaking some sort of characterization is too extreme, but they're asking for shadings so you know who's speaking other than the author. And that's kind of interesting. I think I have to keep coming back to the fact that I am in service of the material. I am there to speak for the author the best way I can and not to impose my stuff on anything. I am the throat, going from the author's brain into the brain of the listener. And my job is to make that material as compelling and clear and interesting and the author's voice as I can.
You narrated a memoir by Julia Child titled My Life in France, which I loved, just loved.
I loved that book too. Boy, did I love that book.
And then a few years later, this Lollapalooza of a biography.
Dearie.
A 25-hour biography of Julia.
Yeah.
So let's begin with the memoir. How did you first approach it? Because Julia has many, many outstanding qualities, not the least of which is her voice.
Julia's quoted extensively in Dearie, and they said, we don't want an impersonation of Julia Child. And I said, good, because I really don't want to do one. So they said, but we do want a flavor of her speech. And I thought, yeah, I can do that. That's okay. I can do that. And that was fun. That was really fun.
And well, you did that with My Life in France, too.
I probably did instinctively.
Yeah, no, for sure, for sure.
I don't remember them actually discussing it with me, but that was my choice and the director's choice, and they went with it, so that was good.
In Paris, and later in Marseille, I was surrounded by some of the best food in the world, and I had an enthusiastic audience in my husband, so it seemed only logical that I should learn how to cook la cuisine bourgeoise, good traditional French home cooking. It was a revelation. I simply fell in love with that glorious food and those marvelous chefs. The longer we stayed there, the deeper my commitment became.
Let me ask you this. In narrating those books, I know for me, Kimberly, listening to them, I ate a lot. I was cooking a lot. I'm not joking. I mean, I really upped my cooking game like crazy. Did it have that impact on you?
Well, I did. I was at an estate sale shortly after I recorded that book. And it was an estate sale of an actress by the name of Kathleen Freeman, who was a wonderful character woman. You'd know her in a minute if you saw her. Anyway, she died and her estate sale was being held. And I thought, oh, that's kind of cool. I'm going to go to that estate sale. So I'm wandering around and I got to her bookshelf. And there is Julia Child's book, Mastering the Art of French Cooking. And I bought it. It was very cool. It was very cool. She makes the best leek and potato soup going.
I still use her beef bourguignon recipe.
Do you really?
Oh, yeah.
I made that a few months ago. It was very good.
It is very good. Well, both books, especially My Life in France, a lot of French.
A lot of French.
Was that a challenge?
Well, I took French in high school. I have schoolgirl French. So it wasn't like I was, coming from nowhere with that. But it was hard. And the director and I had to do a lot of research to make sure it was correct. And actually, now that you mention it, the research in nonfiction is really fun. It's really fun. It's exciting to learn new stuff. I did back-to-back 2 books that were so difficult. I can't even begin to tell you. One of them was a survey of Queen Isabella of Spain. And she lived quite an interesting life, and it was quite an international life as well. There were 8 languages in that book, and so much pronunciation research that the poor director was just snowed. And I'd look at the page of text and I'd realize there were 8 or 9 things that I didn't know how to say. And I'd have to stop every time and say, "So, Kim, how do you say that?" And finally, after a day or two of this, I said, "Kim," her name was Kim Grunenfelder Smith. I said, "Let's divvy up the research." Because at Random House, the director's responsible for the research. And the narrator comes in and says, "How do I say that?" Well, in this case, it was just too much for one person. So the two of us got together and did it ourselves. We exchanged lists and so forth. Then the following week, we're both working on the same book about malaria and about how people are trying to combat malaria over the centuries. And it's full of scientists' names that nobody can find even on YouTube. And it's full of chemistry and drugs and things. And I remember once we finally called the author and said, "We can't find this anyplace, this name of this drug." And the author said, "I don't know how to say it either." So that was very hard. Those 3 or 4 weeks were pretty hard going, but boy, was it interesting.
I bet the Julia Child biography, Dearie, was interesting too. 25 hours long. How do you prepare for something that length?
I think that's the longest book I've ever recorded. Preparation involves knowing the material, and I can't even tell you that I sit in my room and say, "Well, how am I going to attack this?" Because I just don't. I sit down in front of the mic and I let the text take me where it's going to go.
And is that where pacing comes in too? When you're in front of the microphone, you need to settle into the book to get the right rhythms?
I think that every text has its own rhythm and you have to listen to that. And I don't force a rhythm on something. Occasionally I've gotten a note from a director saying, "You don't need to deliberate over this so much. You can go faster or slower." That's rare, though. And maybe that's from being in the theater. It's sort of instinctive. I also was a singer, so maybe that has something to do with it. The text is kind of a form of music. I don't know. There are scenes where in fiction where I will just know that it has to be the way it comes out. You know, it's instinctive at this point in my career. I've had enough experience that I know how a scene should play.
With nonfiction, I'm thinking of Joan Didion's book of essays that you narrated.
Oh, Joan Didion.
Let me tell you what I mean.
Yes.
Now, I think the challenges of narrating essays and essays by someone as well known as Didion, I would find it a little bit formidable.
Well, here's an interesting bit of trivia. When I was young, I used to do a Joan Didion piece as an audition piece. Back in the day, they used to say, "Bring in an audition piece." They wouldn't say they wanted to hear from the script that they were producing. They wanted you to come in, and I have an actor friend who used to call them your party piece. And I absolutely loved Joan Didion, and she had a collection of essays that was titled "Slouching Towards Bethlehem." And in that collection of essays is one called "Goodbye to All That." And it's about a young woman herself coming to New York as a very young person and how New York changed her. And that piece just really spoke to me. And I did it for years as an audition piece. So when I was asked to read her book, I was thrilled, absolutely thrilled, because, again, her cadence is one that I understand in some organic way.
I have never read anything I needed to know in an underground paper. But to think that these papers are read for facts is to misapprehend their appeal. It is the genius of these papers that they talk directly to their readers. They assume that the reader is a friend, that he is disturbed about something, and that he will understand if they talk to him straight. This assumption of a shared language and a common ethic lends their reports a considerable cogency of style.
And then there's poetry. I mean, specifically, you've narrated quite a bit by Mary Oliver. And I would think narrating poetry is a different animal again.
Yes, it is. And Mary Oliver is someone I wasn't even aware of until, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago, when a friend of mine posted one of her poems on Facebook, and I read it and I thought, oh my word, this is so beautiful. Poetry is a kaleidoscope of images and sound and feelings. It's very immediate. It's very naked. And her poetry in particular is accessible in a way that some other poetry is not, to me anyway. It's clear what she's saying. And I think that's its strength. I think that's why she's so popular, Mary Oliver, because she speaks to you in a very direct way.
Devotions is a recent book of poetry by Mary Oliver that you narrated. It's a collection of 200, maybe plus poems that feature her work from her very first book of poetry, published in 1963 when she was 28, through her most recent collection, published in 2015. So it spans her entire career.
Yeah.
How did you approach narrating that book? Did you try to do it straight through? Would you do a section of poems and then take a step back? I'm so curious about that.
It's interesting that you bring that up, because the director on that book, Christina Rooney, is a brilliant woman. And she came into the studio the first day and we were talking about the work and how we were going to approach it. And she said, I think we just need to take as much time as we need. If you need to sit for a couple of minutes between poems, that's great. Let's do that. And she said, it needs to breathe. And I said, yeah, you're right. It does need to breathe. And so we did that. I mean, not that we stopped between every piece and contemplated things. We didn't. But we had made that pact that it wasn't about getting it done in a certain amount of time. It was about making each one of those poems live in the way that Mary would have intended it to.
When I am among the trees, especially the willows and the honey locust, equally the beech, the oaks, and the pines, they give off such hints of gladness. I would almost say that they save me, and daily. I am so distant from the hope of myself, in which I have goodness and discernment, and never hurry through the world, but walk slowly and bow often. Around me the trees stir in their leaves and call out, "Stay a while." The light flows from their branches, and they call again. "It's simple," they say, "and you, too, have come into the world to do this, to go easy, to be filled with light, and to shine."
She just was somebody who appreciated the natural world so wholeheartedly and in a way that I don't, as a person, enough appreciate it. My husband puts bird feeders out in the tree in the front yard, and we have had more fun watching those birds. And in the morning, of course, they all flock to our house because the chow is there, you know, and they sing. They sing in the morning. It's really beautiful. And I understand why Mary Oliver was so entranced by nature.
How do you choose what projects to take on as a narrator?
I don't choose them. They choose me. And by they, I mean the producer of the project, not the text itself. I've said no to a couple of things, but not many.
And what do you do if you don't like, for whatever reason, a book that you've agreed to narrate? How do you adjust?
You know, that's happened to me a couple of times. Fortunately, only a couple of times. And what I think, Joe, is I have promised to do this job to the best of my ability. And whether I am happy with the message I'm sending or not is not relevant. What is relevant is that I have given my word to do my best work, and I will do the best work I'm capable of doing.
Do you listen to audiobooks?
Yes, I do. I love audiobooks. I love audiobooks. And there are so many talented people out there now. I also used to proofread for Random House before the machines took over that job. So I got to listen to a lot of really great work. There is a book called New York, narrated by Mark Bramhall. And the text starts when New York was New Amsterdam and goes all the way through to 9/11. And that book is 40 hours long, and I have listened to it 3 times.
Oh, my Lord.
It's so if you're looking for something historical fiction, if you love historical fiction, listen to that book. He is brilliant.
If you were giving advice to somebody about narrating audiobooks, if somebody wanted to get into this work of audiobook narration, what would you say to them?
First of all, I would say that my experience is probably irrelevant to them because everybody's story is different. Everybody came to this work in a different way, which I find really fascinating. I mean, there's no one way to Jericho, you know. It's however the cards fall. But I would say practice reading aloud and listen to other people doing it. You'll learn a lot from listening to other people. I did, for sure. It's a very particular skill set. You have to be able to read ahead with your eye to know where you're headed, you know, on the page. And some really fine actors can't do that. So it's a skill that I suspect can be learned. So maybe you could spend some time doing that. As to how to break in, I really don't know how to do that nowadays. I mean, when I was new to this, as I said to you earlier, I just sent them a recording and that was that. I don't know if that would work today. I mean, a lot of people are interested in doing this work now. And the industry has grown exponentially. I think the year I started, there were maybe 4,000 books produced. That's the figure that sticks in my head. And now it's, I don't know how many, 50,000 a year? And when I began this work, the authors didn't care about the audio rights. And sometimes we would record books that had been in print for weeks, months. Now the audiobook comes out the same day that the print edition comes out. So it's become way more important than it used to be, which is great. It's a growing industry, and I think that's wonderful. And you know what? I have to give so much credit to Robin Whitten and AudioFile because they put us on the map. They championed this industry.
And they championed the narrators.
Absolutely, they did.
I mean, Robin was always so clear, this is about the narrators.
Absolutely, they did.
And so what does it mean for you to be named a Golden Voice by AudioFile magazine?
I don't think it's sunk in yet. I've worked hard to be good at this, and I've loved it. And to be awarded in this way is gratifying, and it makes me feel pretty darn great. But it's like the icing on the cake. The cake has been all the years I've been able to do this successfully, and I'm so grateful for that. And to be recognized in this way is humbling, to be honest, because there is so much great work being done out there. And to be singled out this way makes me feel pretty special.
Well, part of the pleasure for me is in preparing for this interview, I get to listen and re-listen to your wonderful work. So I can honestly say it is an honor so well-deserved. And many congratulations.
Oh, Jo, that is so sweet of you to say that.
It's sincere. Kimberly, thank you so much.
Oh, you're very welcome. You're very welcome. I'm so happy to talk with you about this industry that we both love so much.
Me too. Thank you. That was Golden Voice Kimberly Farr. You can find reviews for hundreds of books narrated by Kimberly at audiofilemagazine.com. This has been a bonus edition of Behind the Mic with AudioFile Magazine. Follow Behind the Mic wherever you get your podcasts, and then take a moment to leave us a rating. It will help people to find us. Support for Behind the Mic comes from HarperCollins Leadership, publisher of The Little Book of Data, Understanding the Powerful Analytics That Drive AI, Make or Break Careers, and Could Just End Up Saving the World. Available everywhere you get your audiobooks. Behind the Mic is produced by Jessica Lockhart, Robin Whitten, Michelle Cobb, Stephen Cummings, Leslie Fine, Alan Minskoff, Alex Ritchie, Laura Rossi, and Kendra Winchester are our contributors. Jennifer Dow and Coco McCracken are our editors. And the music is William Ross Chernoff's Nomads 4-Way. I'm Jo Reed. Good listening.